All right, we're back for the second half of our review. I do understand, brothers, that it's pretty long, and really, you may not sit through this whole thing. You may just breeze through it, or not even watch it at all. It is a review, so you may already have a high degree of comfort, but you also probably get a lot more hands-on with Andres and Damien on Thursday as you kind of go through the review, look across the chapters and areas that you're struggling or not as comfortable in, and maybe they can help bring some stuff out. Maybe you can just look for those sections within this, the first part or the second part, which is now uh, 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 review. And maybe that'll help clear something up. Hopefully, it won't make it more confusing. And I apologize for not doing this, in person. I had scheduling issues that I messed up on, and now I'm sick. So anyway, we'll get through it. Okay. All right, so we left off starting just opening up and starting in first and second personal pronouns, and so I want to start with that. So from chapter 11 of Mouse's Basis of Biblical Greek. So let me get over here. There we go. And so you remember, I'm sure, a personal pronoun functions to replace its and to serve in place of its antecedent. A pronoun's a word that takes the place of a noun, right, and replaces the noun that's replacing is the antecedent. Like you shall call his name Jesus. Well, Jesus for he will save his people. The he, of course, is the antecedent. The pronoun Jesus is the antecedent to that pronoun. So it goes back to it. So it's going to point back to the antecedent, and always good, especially in Greek. It makes it pretty easy to find the antecedent because it must agree with the antecedent in its number and gender. Not necessarily in its case, though, because it may functioning in a different role, a different. Maybe not the subject, or maybe it's the genitive case, or maybe it's the possessive case, or the accusative case, the direct object or indirect object, dative case. So it may have a different function in its place, but it will have agree with the antecedent in number and gender. And so when we look at in the English pronoun, it must agree with the antecedent. That's what I just said. And agree with the antecedent in gender and number, but not necessarily in its case or its function. It will have its own function depending on how it's being used in the sentence, right? So Jesus is a masculine nominative singular. Jesus, he will save his people. He is a masculine nominative singular as well, so it does agree in that case. But his people would be masculine genitive singular. So it agrees in all cases, in all, that's not usually cases, in all instances, it will agree with the antecedent in its number and person. But the case will depend upon how it functions in the sentence. All right, so and here are the personal pronouns. I hope you remember these. The fascinating thing about it, I know that it's a little confusing, I think, at one time for someone, that there's no gender here. And that's true in English, right? I have a gender, but when I speak about I, it's not referring to a specific gender. My, me, we, are, us, are genderless nouns or personal pronouns. Same with second person, right? You, whether you're talking about singular or plural, there's no gender associated with that in English. Same with Greek. So ego is a nominative singular, and meaning I, and it's a first person nominative singular. There's no gender associated with it. Mu would be the genitive, the my, it shows the possessive singular. Dative would be moi, to me, with me, by me. Accusative singular would be me, just me. And on the plural, the second person side of the singular, we're staying with the singular, su would be you, the nominative singular. The genitive would be, of course, also su, spelled with the omicron upsilon, meaning your. So it shows the possession. And soy is the dative form in the singular, to you, with you, by you, and the accusative form, se. Just you in the singular form. Okay. Now the plural side for the first person, it does follow the pattern of hemes, Hamon, Hamin, Hamas is very similar to what we see in our nouns. In many cases, the genitive has the the omega nu ending. We see the iota nu ending in the dative, and we see the omicron sigma ending in the accusative plural. So that's nothing new. We've seen that before. So Hamas, Hamon, Hamin, Hamin. Uh, 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 I can't even see right now. Okay, Hamas. All right, my eyes are blurry because of the cold I have. And the same thing in the second person. Instead of the hey, hey mace, hey moan, hey mean, hey moss, it's the humes, humon, humin, humas. And what's important here to notice that these are here is the rough breathing, and so it has that H sound in front of it as well. I also want to point out, of course, when you're looking at an emphatic for the singular, emu, emoi, emi, we just add the epsilon is uh, put preceding the personal pronoun, and it makes it more emphatic. It's more like emoi, my, it's emphatic. Okay, and then same with the second person plural. The difference is, or singular, Sue and Sue, the only difference is the accent. And the accent is added for to give the emphatic emphasis here. So that's kind of what we're doing. Anyway, all right. So hopefully you remember all that. I think the key thing is that there is no gender, same in English, so it's nothing new. But when we go to a third person, well, okay, this we just talked about this, and that the emphatic form, the emu, the emoy, eme, su, soy, se. So we did that. And so here's a personal pronoun and an emphatic. Say here. Okay, singular unemphatic forms have no accent. Pater mu versus hapater. That looks the same to me. What did I miss? Unemphatic forms have no accent and are pronounced with the preceding word. What am I missing here? Hapater mu, hapater mu. Okay, so pronounced with the preceding word. Yeah, I don't remember why I have this and what that really intends to say, so I apologize. Unemphatic forms have no accent. Okay, moo, moo, got it, no accent. Is that what we saw before back here? Uh, moo, moo, no accent. Sue, 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 no accent. So we saw that before. That's okay, got that. And then okay. And so they're showing that this is the normal and this is how it changes, but I don't see a change. Now, I do know that earlier on, this is what it looked like, and I said, that ain't right, and I went and made a change to it. And but I don't, I don't remember being that. Uh, so I'm not real sure, but some circumstances, the preceding word adds an accent. Okay, so basically, so what's happening here? Ta, honama, mu, right? So no accent on mu, but in some cases you see there's already an accent here, the smooth breathing and its accent with a grave accent, and then here you have the accent added. So it's got two accents. Well, one of them is associated with mu, and it just moved over. That's all I really remember why. I don't know. Okay, so also we see, for example, first and second personal pronouns, ego pistuo ton lagon su. So we really have a couple here, right? Ego is the nominative singular, right? Ego, nominative singular, um, I, and so we have I. Pistuo, believe. Actually, it's I believe. Now, you can't say that ego in of itself is emphatic, but the fact that it is added in preceding or beginning of sentence may be emphatic. You have to look at the context. But so pistuo means I believe, and you have ego, I believe. So I believe, and so that may have an emphatic emphasis. I believe, and this has got ton lagon. There's our accusative. So it's functioning in the direct object. I believe the word, but now it's the word is modified with the personal pronoun second person genitive. Excuse Sue. So it's I believe the word of you, or we might more aptly translate I believe your word, kind of thing. So I don't think that's overly complicated for you. So, in English, we see that in third person personal pronouns, we do have gender in the singular form he, she, it, right? There's masculine, feminine, and neuter, his, her, its, him, her, it. But in the plural form, we lose the gender again, just like we did in the first and second. Uh, uh, Singular and masculine, we lose the gender. But here in the third person English, we have gender in the singular, but not in the plural. They, their, them is genderless. Fits right in today's society, I guess. I don't know. All right, that wasn't funny. Sorry. All right, but in Greek, regardless, we will have gender in third person, whether you're talking about singular or plural. So it'll follow the second 2-1-2 pattern, right? Second declension, masculine, first declension, feminine, second declension, neuter. It's going to follow that pattern. Autos, alte, alta, he, she, it, right? Autu, altes, autu, excuse me. He, his, her, its, right? The genitive, plural, or singular possessive. Auto, alte, auto, to him, to her, to it. You see the same case ending. So this should be nothing new. The important thing, though, to remember that this is the smooth breathing, and because we're going to see here in a moment where we get to the demonstrative pronouns, I think it is, they have the rough breathing on some of these words. So, and anyway, so we follow the same kind of pattern that we've seen before. It's nothing really new. But here we do have gender in third person, whether you're talking about singular person, not the second and not the first person. All right, killed that one. All right, so third person personal pronoun, he, she, it, they will see. He will see God. They will see, she will see God. It will see God. So it can function. We're talking about how it functions now. Third person can function just as a personal pronoun, third person. He will see God. They will see God. She will see God. I don't know if you can do it will see God. It can also function as an adjectival intensifier. So, in other words, it modifies another word where it agrees in case, number, and gender. And usually it is functions as the subject. So it's going to agree it to, like you have, it will be in the same case, and normally it's a nominative case. And oftentimes it is then intensifying the subject. So normally it's in the predicate position. What does that mean? Well, in the predicate position, you have the article with the noun and not with the adjective. Well, this is not really an adjective here; it's a pronoun, right? So we'll get to the Greek in a minute. So it would be like to make it intensifier, would be like God Himself, or the apostle himself, or the church herself. Church is ecclesia is feminine, so it'd be herself. And it can also function as the identical adjective. In other words, here we got in now te hora. Well, in the hour, and why in she hour, in its hour, in so here's the dative singular feminine form about te. Well, it's feminine because it's agreeing with the hour, and it's in the dative because it's agreeing with the prepositional phrase. And so in te hora. And so its translation would be the identical adjective in the same hour or at that same hour, whatever. All right, so that's what we have on personal pronouns. And then now we'll move to demonstrative and relative pronouns from chapter 13 and 14. So in English, we have really two demonstratives, right? We have this and these. Those are near. So I've got this book and I got these books. Or I have that book, or I have those books, kind of thing. So that's really all it is. And so in English, it's not inflected for case or gender. It's just this, these, or that, and those. It's either near or it's far, and but it will function either as a pronoun or as an adjective. So it could be that is mine, or these are mine, or those are mine, or that kind of thing. Or it can function adjectively, right? That car is mine. Those books are mine. That kind of thing. So that's how it functions in English. It's very much the same in Greek, but there is it is inflected for case and for gender. So because it needs to stand in place or agree with whatever it's referring to. And so we have a 2-1-2 pattern. The second declension masculine, hutos, tuto, tutu, tuto, tuton. The plural form, hutoi, tuton, tutois, tutus. And then we get the feminine form, alte, tautes. Notice that what you have is you have this rough breathing for the nominative form singular and nominative form singular. And when we don't have the rough breathing, you put a tau in front of it. Okay, so that's one way to recognize and remember. It's also important to notice that it is the rough breathing, especially like for alte and here hutoi and alte. That will help differentiate when you see this hutos or not hutos, but autos, third person personal pronoun in the singular or the plural form. And so that the rough breathing will differentiate that, where in the personal pronoun, third person does not have rough breathing. It will have a smooth breathing with the accent. Here's a rough breathing with the accent. If it has a rough breathing, it's going to have a circumflex, as you can, except for here, I guess. But without the rough breathing, it's going to have the tau in front of it, and that should help. And so that refers to this or of these, to these, this, that kind of stuff. So hopefully that makes sense to you. And then you have the far pronouns. So the near ones, this book, which would be the neuter, right? This would be tuto, which book? Biblia, Bible book, I think, and or these books, right, kind of thing. The near ones, right? So the far ones would be that book or those books, that kind of stuff. So, and here instead of the auto paradigm, you have the ekenos, ekene, ekenoi, and you follow the same case ending kind of patterns. There's our dative singular pattern. There's our accusative pattern, and there's our plural nominative pattern. Same thing in our genitive omega nu pattern. The iota sigma pattern for the dative plural, the sigma pattern ending at the for the accusative plural. So those should be very consistent for you. So that's referring to either that or those. All right. So when you translate it, though, it's typically going to be, oftentimes, can be found independent, and you got to use common sense when you translate. Hutos would just be this. Well, this what? Well, it's a masculine. It's a nominative form. It's a masculine singular, so it will be like this man or this one kind of thing. Ekenai is in the plural form. It's the feminine, right? So, but it's a nominative, so it'd be those what? Well, those women, possibly. So it takes a little common sense. It can also function in a personal pronoun, which would really be what's referred to as a weak demonstrative pronoun. In other words, it's a demonstrative pronoun, but it's not functioning like one. It's functioning like a personal pronoun. And so we translate it as he, she, or it. Context is going to have to help you figure that out and how it's functioning there. It's going to be a demonstrative pronoun, but it may actually function as a weak demonstrative, which means it'd be taking the place of a personal pronoun. I don't know why that is, but I guess it's just a variation. Just like in our language, we have a lot of variables associated with it. It can also function adjectively in the predicate position. Hutos ha anthropos, right? There's our nominative. There's our article with our noun, right? And no article with the, in this case, this is not an adjective now. This is a demonstrative pronoun. So hutos ha anthropos would not be not this is man. It would not be this is man, right? It is the predicate position, but hutos is not an adjective. It's a demonstrative pronoun. So it's going to be this man and not this is man. It's just in the predicate position. Position being the article is with the noun and the preceded by or has the, not necessarily preceded by, but has the, in this case, the demonstrative pronoun does not have the article. That's referred to as the predicate position. And then, and same thing with ekenois, hoi, anthropois, both plural, nominative, ekenoi, plural, nominative, those men. Also, again, the predicate position. You see the articles with the noun and not with the demonstrative. We're used to seeing the article with the noun, and when it's not with the adjective, then we would say those are men. But that's not the case because this is a demonstrative pronoun, not an adjective. It's just functioning in a predicate position like an adjective, and be those men. Okay? Sure, you got it. All right, and now the relative pronoun, which is our last noun chapter, and relative pronouns behave just like pronouns, and so they're not really difficult. Um, Typically, relative pronouns can be translated as who, that, which, whom, whose, those kind of things. So while English, there's a lot of different grammatical perspectives on when you use who, when you use whose, when you use which versus that, those kind of things. Generally speaking, who will refer to people, the teacher whom the students love teaches Greek. Makes sense to me. Um, and whose typically would be associated in some personal way, primarily. And so I sold the car whose color made me ill. It's a little personal relationship there. And then which tends to be more neuter. Which book are you talking about? And that is more associated with gender. I mean, that girl or that type of thing. So the other one thing you want to point out, though, that these who, that, which, as far as a relative pronoun, is not an interrogative. There's a different form for an interrogative. So it would not be who are my students or which are my students or which one of you, didn't do the homework kind of thing. So that's these won't function as interrogatives. Okay, so relative pronouns are pretty basic for us. They look very much like the article or the case endings, or one of the two. And so we follow the same 2-1-2 pattern, masculine, feminine, neuter, has, hey, ha. And notice the rough breathing across the board here. Uh, who, haste, who. Make sure I can't read that over there. Yeah. And ho, hey, ho, right? So the data, all of which we've seen before. So we're not talking about anything new. So if you just recognize the pattern and notice the rough breathing here. Now, what's different here than, say, the article? Well, the article doesn't have, like, hey here. The article, we do have an article, hey, with a rough breathing, but this has the accent. Okay, so it cannot be the article, so it must be something else. In this case, it's the uh, relative pronoun. All right, I know that. I know you got that stuff. And it generally functions as a relative clause. It'd be the first word in a dependent clause. In other words, it cannot stand alone, right? Come to me, whoever is thirsty. Well, whoever is thirsty is the relative clause. Whoever is the relative pronoun. And whoever is thirsty cannot be a standalone sentence. And we, in English, we use commas to separate it out. Obviously, they don't have commas, or they do have commas, but they don't need them for the relative pronoun in the Greek. So what we use commas to separate it up. It's always a great idea, just like prepositional phrases, is to bracket out in some form. Maybe use parentheses for prepositional phrases, but bracket out in some form relative clauses, uh, where maybe brackets or whatever, something to differentiate it. Because one thing is that you'll find that you'll find possibly many times both a subject and a verb in there, maybe even well, not a direct object, but uh, you'll find that there is a verb in there, but it's never the main verb. So it helps to bracket out just to simplify the sentence that you're analyzing. And so it usually modifies a noun, right? Come to me, whoever is thirsty. Well, whoever is modifying come, you know, whoever come. To me is an indirect object. I suppose it could be modifying that. I think more modifies the subject. Whoever, come, whoever is thirsty. I suppose it could be to the direct object, indirect object to me. I personally think it's probably come, but I haven't looked at it. It can function as a substantive, in other words, as the noun or the nominative or the subject or the direct object in the accusative, right? My dog eats what is given to him. Well, my is possessive, showing dog. So the subject is dog or my dog, and eats is the verb. What does the dog eat? Well, whatever is given to him. What is given to him? Well, this relative clause function as the direct object. So a substantive, uh, the object of the verb. Its form, okay, it will have its number and gender will be the same as agree with the antecedent, just like we saw with the personal pronoun. But its case will function will be determined by how it functions in the relative clause. The woman whom we saw was walking to the subway. So whom we saw, whom it will agree in number and gender with the woman, but its case, will probably, I assume this is going to be a nominative case because who we saw. The star that they had seen in the west. Well, it's going to agree, that is going to agree with the star in number and gender, but its case is going to be relative to that phrase that they had seen. If it's difficult to figure out what the what the relative clause is, then just replace it with the antecedent. But you got to find the antecedent, and the star, the one that they seen, the woman, Mary Magdalene, the woman Mary Magdalene we saw was walking to the subway, and so you just really should be able to put the antecedent in its place, and it still make perfect sense. Maybe a little wordy, but that's why we use uh, relative pronouns and such, because it gets a little wordy and gets a little repetitive. Jesus. If we use it over and over and over again instead of he, him, his, then it gets a little repetitive kind of thing. And when you translate, now one of the key things to think about is just keep all the clause together. So find the entire clause, bracket it off, use commas in English. If it's very long, find the subject and the verb, and know that the relative clause will never contain the main subject of the verb ever. So it's why you want to partition it off. It makes it easier. Uh, all right, so now we move to verbs. Exciting. It is, actually. And so we started with the present active indicative, and we're going to be going through the future. So let's see if we can go through this. I think most of this you have. I don't think we spend a lot of time. Uh, so we'll see where we're at with it. All right, so and from a grammatical perspective, verbs refer to in time, it's past, present, or future for the English, right? In tense, English is time and functions time and form. Where time from the standpoint of the speaker, not the hearer, right? So you and I might hear the message or read the message, but the time is from the standpoint of the speaker, and whether he's talking about past, it's his past or his present or his future or her, or whatever. And the tense in the Greek does not refer to time as it does in English. Tense refers only to the form of the verb. Okay, so present doesn't necessarily mean in the present. It oftentimes ends up that way, but it's the form of the verb, a present tense, a past tense. Excuse me, not present tense, imperative tense, future tense. Although there's a lot of correlation relative to that, but tense refers to the form, not necessarily to time. And the reason is because time doesn't always play a factor or at least an emphasis, and sometimes no factor, but not the same emphasis that we have in English. Instead, we see other things. So we see aspect. That's the kind of action, right? Is it complete action, or is it ongoing, continuous, or is it particular? In other words, it goes. We see it over and over again, repetitive in some form, right? The aspect, the kind of action. That's an important aspect or important thing to know. The voice, is it active, passive, or middle? We don't have a middle voice in English. Active, of course, you understand that the subject is doing the action. Passive, meaning the subject is receiving the action. Middle is a combination in that the action is relative to what to the subject is doing, but the results come back upon the subject. And then, of course, we have the mood, right? So the mood is where the relationship and the verb and reality come together or separate, right? From the speaker's perspective, the mood of the verb determines whether or not what's occurring is, from the speaker's perspective, from the speaker's perspective, a reality or potentiality or an imperative, a command, or these kind of things. So an indicative mood expresses a fact or statement, a reality from the speaker's perspective, where an imperative would express a command or decree, where an interrogative would express a sense of uncertainty in the form of a question. Conditional expresses a condition in the form of an if-then statement, which is the same in English. And subjunctive, though, would express a wish or desire or doubt or some kind of hypothetical. It's a potentiality. And then there's the optative, which don't really. I think there's only 6 of them used in the New Testament, so we really don't spend any time with it. But it's also potentiality, but it's much lesser degree of potentiality than, say, the subjunctive mood kind of thing. So it expresses even lesser degree of a desire or wish kind of thing. All right, and so aspect though is in Mouse, and I read a lot of different reviews of Mouse's book, and this is one of the areas that he gets a lot of critic critique critics about. They're very critical about it because he uses terms that will make it very confusing. We can try to simplify it if we can. Okay. So aspect really can be either completed or continuous, right? I studied last night. Well, that's a completed kind of task, right? It's something you did. It's something past and some kind of completed action. It's simple. We don't know much about it except that it occurred, right? Or it could be a continuous action. I was studying last night. It's an uncompleted action because there's this ongoing form being used. The ing, a participle kind of form, is uncompleted action. And we often have to have helping forms in the verb. I was studying, where the complete action just say, hey, I studied last night. But when we go to continuous, we often have to have helping verbs. So aspect in completed for the present would be I study. Okay, I am studying, whether it be continuous. I study. In other words, it's a completed action without giving me any more information how long or whatever is associated with it, except that it's done in the present. In the past would be I studied. In the future is I will study. We need the helping verb will. For continuous kind of aspect of a going, I am studying would be a present. That's why you have the helping verb am. I am studying. I was studying would be a continuous kind of action in the past. I will be studying would be a continuous action in the future. So hopefully that makes a little sense. This becomes pretty important as we move forward in some of these things. The main components of a Greek verb, though, now we're talking about form, okay? Tense, it's the tense stem, right? Present tense stem, imperfect tense stem, future tense stem, tense stem. And typically, the pattern we use in all grammars, lu, present tense stem, plus a connecting vowel, the omicron, plus the personal ending. So we moved away from cases on nouns, right? And now we're personal endings. Don't mix them up until you get to participles, and they do mix up then, but not on verbs. They'll mix up on verbs or participles, but not most verbs. So we have tense stem, connecting vowel, and personal endings. Lu plus the omicron plus men is lu amen. And so we've learned these tenses. Now, so far, I think what we've learned is the primary tenses, right? The primary tenses are associated with the present tense, the future tense, and the perfect tense. And, okay, I'm going to write over here. The primary tense is associated with the present, future, and the perfect tense, right? And so, and these are the personal endings for the active voice primary tenses, which are associated with the present, future, and perfect, in the first person, right? First, second, and third, singular. First person, singular. Second person, singular. Third person, singular. First person, plural. Second person, plural. Third person, plural. Okay, so primary tenses for the active voice, first, second, third person, singular, plural. Same thing with the middle passive voice. These are our primary tense endings, okay? My, sai, tai, metha, esta, untai. So lua, my, lu, a. And we did at one time talk about the various changes and why that occurred, but I'm not going to go over that now. Lu, etai, lua, metha, lu, esta, and lu, untai. And so this is what we've done thus far as we've looked at the present tense and the future tense. We'll be looking later on in this next couple of weeks at the perfect tense, and then we'll also move towards the secondary tenses. Secondary tenses are associated with the imperfect tense and the aorist tense, right? And these are all going to be augmented tense. We're going to add some change to the primary tense stem. and we're going to augment it. See the epsilon that's augmented on all these? Well, that's our augments here for the imperfect and the aorist tense. And then we're going to use a different set of tense personal endings, right? So the nu, the sigma, the no ending here for the third person singular form. And still we have the min, the tat, and the noon. So the min agrees in the active voice for the primary tenses as well as secondary tenses on the first person plural. And then we got elueta, the tat ending, and then eluthon, the noon ending, right? And then we do the same kind of thing with the middle passive voice. These are our personal endings. And so this is what you want to know. It's this matrix here that you're going to end up knowing. And the more you're comfortable with that, the easier it's going to be. So elumain, eluu, elueto, elumeta, eluometa, eluesta, eluonto. All right. I keep messing that up, but anyway. So just a good refresher and maybe pointing to some things that's to come. I love these slides right here. This is the present active indicative verb with its tense stem. The tense stem here is the present tense stem. It's lu. And we add the connecting vowel and we add whatever the appropriate primary personal ending is. That will tell us the person, right? First, second, third, the number, singular, plural, and the voice, active or middle. In this case, it is going to be first, second, and third, singular and plural with an active voice. So it's a present active indicative. And so we use those personal endings here for the luo, lues, lue, luamen, luete, luusi. And so it's I am loosing, right? Or I loose, you are loosing, or you loose. Again, it kind of talks about where you're talking about a completed action, right? I loose in the present. Maybe I loosed in the completed action in the past, or I will loose in a completed action in the future, or where you have a continuous kind of action. So I am loosing would be a present kind of thing, where maybe I was loosing in the past and I will be loosing in the future kind of thing. So here we're talking about its typical translation, but understand that the aspect of this, completed or continuous, always keep that in mind. Completed or continuous may change how you do this translation. That's why you'll see I loose versus I am loosing. Well, they're both appropriate, but context will help you determine which one you need. So anyway, I know that was fun. I'm sure you enjoyed it. All right, and so then we have our master verb chart. You're going to end up learning all of this, but it's not complex. Our present tense stem, right? We're just following this pattern right here. Okay, we're looking at this and any other augments that might be associated with. For the present tense, there is no augment or reduplication, and we're going to use the present tense stem, and we're going to use a connecting vowel, omicron, epsilon, with the primary active endings, right? The primary active endings, okay? So primary active endings, and the first singular paradigm would be luo, I am loosing, or I loose, or I am loosing. There's our completed present, and there's I am loosing continuous present. All right, so for the present middle passive tense, it's still the present tense in the middle passive voice using the present tense stem. That's that lu, omicron, epsilon, connecting vowels, and we're going to use the primary middle passive personal endings right here. So that's all we're doing. And then the primary middle passive luomai would be the first person singular. And so it would be I am loosed or I am being loosed. So it's something that's done passive or potentially in the middle. So now what we haven't got to yet is these others, the imperfect active, the imperfect middle passive. That's coming up very soon, where we'll add an augment to it, okay? And we'll talk about the difference between that. Well, no, there's no difference. We'll talk about the augment to it, and that's what you're seeing over here. There's the augment here. So we'll start using the secondary tenses for the imperfect tense, secondary personal endings, for the imperfect tense and the aorist tense, and that's what's happening with that. So basically, we're just following a pattern. And so when we get to that, we'll do more of that. We did the future active. We're going to use the future active tense stem, which for luo happens to be the same tense stem. It's not always the case, but here it is. Now we're going to add what's called a tense formative, right? To differentiate luo in the present, we need to see something that's going to make it reflective of something in the future, because we're going to use the same primary active personal endings. And so luo, and it would be, we need something. So there's a tense formative that's added. So it's luso, and I will lose. It's a future tense. And so then we looked at the liquid future tense. The liquid future, of course, has the epsilon sigma, and that's where the stem ends with a liquid, the lambda, mu, nu, or rho, right? And so that then it will use the epsilon sigma tense formative. Other than that, it functions pretty much the same. You may have some other changes that occur because how things, and same with this sigma from time to time, but generally speaking, it's not really complex. I think we did the future middle. It's very much the same thing. And we got the sigma for the tense formative, we've seen future active. Well, the thing here is the future middle actually uses the future active tense stem. It's not a big deal. You don't really know that when you're reading, okay? But technically, that's what it's doing. And we're keeping the same tense formative with the sigma, the omicron, epsilon. We're using the primary, middle, passive. All right, the primary, middle, passive right here. Primary, middle, passive personal endings. And then we're going to, and so our first singular paradigm for the future middle is, I can't read that in that small writing, elusomai. And so I will go, or I will come. And, I think it's because it's using the future active stem here. And so then we have our first future passive and our second future passive. Can't remember. We haven't done that yet, have we? I don't think we've done that. I can't remember. Anyway, I think we've done like not the liquid aorist. We haven't done any aorist yet. No, I don't know that maybe we did the first future and second future, but it's using air passive stem ending. So I don't know. We've not done this. The theta, eta, sigma. But this is what we're going to come to. So we're going to learn the rest of this, but we're just following the same pattern, okay? We're going to figure out what the tense is and the tense that we're going to use. We're going to look at whether it has an augment or reduplication. Reduplication is going to be used in the perfect form, whereas the other secondary tenses, the imperfect and the aorist, is going to have the augment, the epsilon. But in the perfect tense, we're going to add a reduplication to it. We'll get more about that later, okay? And we're just going to keep following the same kind of patterns, guys, and see different tense formatives to help us recognize what tense it's doing. It's why it's called a tense formative, so we can recognize it. All right, and then contract verbs. All right, now contract verbs kind of gave, I think, you guys a little bit of a hiccup, but know that contract verbs are typically not that difficult. All right, they're basically contractions occur with the alpha, the epsilon, and the omega. So when we have a verb whose stem, what happened? I just hiccuped here. I don't know. I guess I'm back. Okay. A verb that whose stem ends with alpha. I'm still recording. Yeah. Okay. A verb whose stem ends in alpha, epsilon, and omega, and then you add the case ending to it, right? That's a contract verb. So, for example, I don't like the way that I wrote this. Poi e, there's our contract vowel, the epsilon, plus the connecting vowel, the omicron, plus the personal ending, poet omen. There's some changes that occur as a result of this, and you get poi umen. And you'll always see the lexical form will, in fact, show, this would be poi o, will always show the lexical form that you look up will show the contract vowel. But when you see it used in the text, that contract vowel is always gone. And most contracts are pretty easily recognizable. It's not so poi u omen, it's just circumflex. It's going to give you a clue that something occurred. And so there's been some contractions. That's why it's called a contract vowel. Contractions as a result. And so that's alpha, the epsilon, and the omega at the end of the stem, when it's added to the connecting vowel, are going to contract. And I think we gave you, I don't know if it's in here, I don't know if we got it in here or not. I don't think we do. Okay, there's a matrix I gave you that you can kind of look up when the epsilon contract valve comes in contact with a different valve and what the end results are. All right, so for example, and this is what it shows for the Omicron upsilon is formed, it's a result of poi o min, right? There's our contract valve, the connecting valve, and you get poi u min. And so the u is formed by an epsilon omega contraction, omicron, not omega, yeah, omega, the omega epsilon, excuse me, omicron, epsilon omicron contraction, the omicron epsilon contraction, or an omicron omicron contraction will give you the omicron upsilon. And so we got poi u. The epsilon iota is a result of the epsilon contraction. And so when those two contract, we get poi ete and poi ete. And yeah, we went through what some of the changes were, but I'm not going to do all that now. One, I don't have it here, so and I don't have it memorized either. The alpha is formed by the alpha epsilon contraction. The alpha subscript iota is formed by the alpha epsilon iota contraction. So the alpha epsilon contract, get the alpha. It's just like this one, the alpha iota epsilon contract to an alpha, the alpha epsilon contracts to an alpha, but then that iota subscripts. And so agapa ete, which, that would be, well, it wouldn't be the lexical form because the lexical form would be the nominative, and that's a second person. And so this would be a contract to agapate. And then agapa is third person, would be agapa. And you see that contraction with the alpha epsilon gets you the alpha, and you get the subscript iota, and then of course you get the circumflex there too. And the eta subscript iota is formed by the same thing, the epsilon alpha contraction, and we get the iota subscript form. So poi si, my psi tie, that would be the second person singular. Poi I, the sigma drops. The intervocalic, remember? They have a vowel, you have a vowel. Sigma doesn't like to get trapped in the middle, so it just runs away. And poi I, now that epsilon alpha is going to contract to give us the eta, and this iota is going to subscript, and we get poi a. That's how it all comes together. So that's how contract verbs are. Some hints for identifying that circumflex can tell you that something occurred, some kind of contraction occurred, and the personal endings are really the same. You just got to concentrate on similarities, and you begin to sort of pull it together and recognize it. Oh, here's that chart. Okay, so here's our contract vowels, and when it comes in contract with the epsilon iota diphthong, the eta subscript iota, et cetera, tells you what that matrix will give you, how it contracts. Okay, so in chapter 18, we went to the present middle passive indicative verbs. I don't know what time I started, so I don't know how long I've gone, how much longer I have, but we're going to go till we're done. You can pause, skip through, whatever. I won't know, but God knows. All right, that was my joke. But he does know. It's not really a joke. Present middle passive indicative verb. So we went from the present active indicative verbs. Now we're looking at the present middle passive. It's not middle passive, present middle or indicative or present passive indicative. They just happen to use the same personal endings. All right, so defining an active, middle, or passive voice. In the active voice, subject performs the action of the ball. I hit the ball. Passive, the subject receives the action. I am hit by the ball. The middle voice, which English doesn't have, there's a lot of nuances associated with the meaning, but the majority of the Greek New Testaments are translated as if they are active. And this book calls it deponent. I don't do it. So most times they almost translate it as they're active because we don't really have a good English way to do this. We have to actually put a lot of helping words to make it seem that way. And sometimes it's very difficult. A lot of times they just translate it active because the subject did the action, but they also received the results of the action. And so English is a little bit hard to make that translation. And we see different Bible translations doing different things with that. We want forming the present passive indicative. We have the present tense stem plus a connecting vowel plus a passive personal ending, right? So lu, there's our present tense stem, it didn't change, plus the connecting vowel, the omicron or the epsilon. We get luamai for first person plural personal ending. So luamai, I am being loose, right? There's the helping, I am being loose, and that would be the passive form of that. Luametha, present tense stem, connecting vowel, passive personal ending. Luametha, meta, my saitai, meta, esta. So my is, that's right. So I'm sorry. My is the first person singular. My saitai. I am. That's why it's I am being loose. And then meta, esta, esta, untai. We are being loose. There's the first person plural are being loose. Okay, so I gotta remember to point over here so you can see me. All right. So many verbs do not have an active form, so the middle passive form carries the active meaning. So there are verbs that don't have an active form. Erkomai. Well, my is of course the primary personal endings for the middle passive uh, personal endings, right? And there is no active form for erka o or erka eta or erka tet. It doesn't exist. So erkamai oftentimes will function and carry the active meaning. So by form, this is the present middle passive indicative, first person singular, right? So this is present middle passive indicative, first person singular, erkamai. But there's no active form for erkamai exists, so this verb is regularly translated as I come or I go. So it's very, very common, and we see erkamai as I come or I go, even though it's using a middle passive ending, because it just doesn't have an active ending. All right, hopefully that made some sense. All right, so these are our personal endings, my saitai, meta, esta, untai, and so hopefully you got those down and you know them comfortable. Uh, and so we function the same way. We're using the present tense stem, lu, plus the connecting vowel, plus the primary personal endings, my saitai, meta, untai, esta, esta untai. And so we get luomai, lue, luetai, luometa, luesta, and luontai. So I am being loose, you are being loose. And of course, these are all continuous kind of actions, right? You could say, I am loosed, which would be a completed action in the present tense. So again, there's still an aspect here that the form doesn't really bring out, right? The primary personal endings, whether passive or active or middle, doesn't really bring out. But just remember that every verb can have a function in a aspect, have a completed aspect or a continuous kind of aspect. We see most of our translation here showing the continuous. I am being loose in the passive or form. You are being loose. He, she, it is being loose. We are, you are, they are being loose. Right. All right, now our future active and middle verbs, not the passive, that comes later. All right, and so here we're going to use the future tense stem, which in this case is the same as lu. That's not always the case. We're going to add a tense formative. We already mentioned that, the connecting vowel, the omicron or epsilon, and then whatever the personal endings are. And because it's active, we're going to use. I say because it's active. There's some cases where because it's active or because it's middle passive, we're still using active endings. But in this case, the future tense stem for active voice is going to use the active primary personal endings. And so we get the lu plus the sigma plus the omicron with remember there's no personal ending in the first one. So luso, we add our sigma, lus ace, lus a, lusomen, lusaete, and lusuusing. Kind of a little bit long here. And so I will loose, and there's you will loose, he, she will loose, and so forth. We, you, they. All right, so. And so in the middle, it's the same thing. We're just going to use these primary personal endings from the middle, right? And we're going to have the same connecting vowel. This particular word has a few, paru, add the sigma, add the connecting vowel, whatever the appropriate one is, and add the personal endings. And so we'll get, I can't read it, Prausomai, prause, prausetai, prausometa, prauseste, prausontai. And so we get I will go, excuse me, I will go, you will go, he, she will go, we, you, they will go. All right. All right. Now, here's the chapter that I think gave people a little bit of trouble. We'll see if we can kind of walk through it, maybe this second or third, or maybe the fourth time. And maybe Andres and Damien will do a much better job with it. I'm sure they do. Okay. This was a review of the contract vowels and how they contract, how they contract. Um, and remember, these are the contract vowels, the alpha, the epsilon, the omicron, when they contract with various personal endings. This is single vowel contractions. It's a little bit different, right? When an alpha contracts with another alpha, it's an alpha. When epsilon contracts with an alpha, it's an eta. You might find a lot of similarities, but not always the same. Because here you have an omicron and omega, here you don't, right? So, and here you have diphthongs, and these are single vowel contractions. Well, you do have diphthongs. No, you don't. Okay. So the alpha, the iota is a diphthong, the alpha iota, the alpha upsilon. So it's just another matrix for you to, keep in your hip pocket as you wander through the grocery store, practice your Greek. All right, now rule number 7, square stops, right? Our labials, which are called voiceless, where we have basically close our lips to make the sound p, b, f. Voiceless voice or aspirates are never the way. This column is voiceless, this column is voiced, this column is aspirates. You might see that somewhere. And when we add a sigma to the labials, the pi, the beta, the theta, that sigma or these labials, the pi, the beta, the theta, will convert to change to a C. And when we add a sigma to the velars, the kappa, the gamma, the xi, key, then it changes to the xi. We add the sigma to the dentals, which is the tau, the delta, the theta. Those change to the sigma. And that's really what a square stop is. Okay? I don't know why I have this. We've already looked at this. This might be just another review. Here's some more detail about some of those changes. I'll leave that for you. You have that in the LMS. These are, again, this is apparently a review I left in there. Okay, so we talk about verbal roots. Okay, the basic form of a verb is in the root, the verbal root. And you'll see different patterns formed, right? Whether you're looking at the present tense stem, the future tense stem, the imperfect tense stem, the aorist, or the perfect tense stem. The tense stem is the form of the verbal root that takes a specific tense, all right? Okay, a lot of complexity, but basically there's verbal root is the basic form of the verb. The tense stem is the form of the verbal root in a specific tense. That's all that is, all right? And we're going to see some patterns associated with this, all right? So the root, the most basic form, is the root, right? And in mouse, they do this little asterisk right here. And yeah, making sure my mouse is on the recording. The little asterisk right here. And so we get lu is the root. And the root has a connotation to loose or ball, is the root for balo. And it has a connotation to throw. In the stem, the basic form is in the particular tense, right? So lu, the root, is luo, but in the future it's luso. In a ball, here's the basic form of the root. In the stem, it's balo for the present, but in the future it's balo. And we touched on this before, right? The present tense stem is actually the most irregular. It has some irregularity to it, okay? And that's why there's a double lambda here, because you see the root doesn't have the double lambda. So most of the tenses follow the roots and follows with the root pattern, but there's some, like the present tense, will add, for various reasons, will add another letter. All right, that was confusing, I'm sure. So here we go again. Lu, luo, lu, luso, present tense, future tense. Bal, balo, there's our present tense double lambda, bal, balo, future. There's things that occurred with the sigma, and I will get into that. So basically, what happens? The verbal root. Uh, uh, From the root, you can form different tense stems. That's the point. You have a present tense, a future tense, aorist tense. Sometimes they'll look the same. Sometimes they won't. Uh, and so pattern one, where the root is the same across the different tenses. So Lu is the same tense for the same root, present tense, future tense, aorist tense. It didn't change, right? So it's the same. Now we did add the tense formative, we did add an augment with another tense formative, the sigma alpha, and so, but the root itself did not change. We added other things to it, but we didn't change the root. And so, pattern one has three subcategories to it. Isn't that fun? There's more and more to learn. Okay, so roots ending in iota or upsilon, such as aku, in the present tense, akuo. In the future tense is akuso. You see, there was no change to the root, right? But with contract verbs, where we looked at the alpha, the epsilon, and the omicron, the poe would be poeo, and that's what we'll see the lexical form in the present tense, but that epsilon will drop in its usage. And we have poieso, and we see some changes that occurred as a result of the sigma being added, right? So the compensatory lengthening here, the epsilon lengthened to the eta before the sigma, and so we had that change. So this root with the epsilon changed as a result of the sigma being added to it. And then you have roots with a ending in a stop, right? Remember our square stops. Here the pay. Blep is our root, and so blepo, no problem in the present tense in this case. Blepso, well, our future tense adds a sigma to it. Well, that sigma, when it comes up against that stop, is going to change, in this case, to the C. And so you get blepso. Anyway, so hopefully that's when you start putting the pieces together and you start seeing how they're used, right? Okay, the other thing is you can have different roots. And this is where it becomes, it's not really complex, but it can be confusing. So, like we said, bal is the root. A present tense stem is balo. Future tense is balo. And the aorist tense is ebalon. They all use the same root, but the present tense adds the lambda to it. Okay. Now these other additions here, this is the future. Add to the sigma. The sigma got changed, and there are things that happen. And here we have the augment, and the aorist tense uses it because the aorist uses different personal endings. Right. The aorist is going to be on the secondary tenses, not the primary tenses. Secondary personal endings, not the primary personal endings. So that's why the on is there. But see, ball remained the same, and their ball added the double lambda to it. So it's a different. And here we find, and here's where you see really different roots. What was this one? This was, yeah, okay. It's not. And it's a different. The root didn't change, but the present tense did. Here we see completely different roots. That's the point. I don't know why this chart was here, because it's not a root change. That's a tense stem change as a result of from the root. Here you have different roots. Erk for erkomai, I come. But when you move to the future, it's eluth. It's a completely different root. And you get elusomai. There's our sigma, which is formative, and there's our omai, our connecting vowel, or my sai tai. So that's nothing new. We have this. I'm not getting that. It's part of the root, so it doesn't really matter. Elu is a different root for the same word, I will come, but in the future tense. All right, so you can have different roots, present tense, future tense. Leg for let go, I say, and here we have er in the root, a different root for ero, meaning I will say in the future. So the future tense uses a different root than the present tense. Hora, there's our root with the rough breathing. Horao, there's our contract vowel. Horao, so you'll find that the lexical form, but when it's actually used, it's horo, excuse me. The alpha is never actually in the text. It's just the lexical form. Anyway, harao, I see, but the future form of the harao is using a different root. It's up. So it's upsamai. So we got the sigma coming for future, right? The transformative coming against the pay. That's going to change that to C. So ops ami. We're going to use uh, uh, I will see. So all right, and then you have another pattern with liquid futures, right? So when we have the liquid tense stems, right? So our future tense stem is men. Well, no. Liquid tense stems are going to be when we have a future tense stem and it ends in a lambda, mu, nu, or rho. Simple as that, all right? And so men, there's a nu, that's a liquid tense stem ending. And instead of using the sigma for the future, we use the epsilon sigma plus the connecting vowel plus the personal endings. So here's the case the active, so we're using the primary personal endings. So no big deal. And so we use the men, s, ma, no ending, and we get meno. Uh, there's some intervocalic stuff that occurs. Well, that's actually later here. And so we get min ss, min ace. I got to read it over here. Min a, minomin, minete, and minusin. And so sometimes we see this intervocalic where the epsilon sigma plus the connecting vowel, the sigma is intervocalic. It's in the middle of two vowels. That's intervocalic. The sigma is trapped between this epsilon and this omicron. He goes, oh, I'm trapped. Let me out of here. And so the sigma runs away. We then get contraction as a result, the epsilon and the omicron. And so we get the epsilon plus the omicron, and we get ooh, right? It goes back to those contract matrix we looked at. And same with the epsilon sigma contracting with an epsilon. The sigma again runs away. It's intervocalic. It's trapped in between two vowels. Get me out of here. And epsilon plus an epsilon then, because the sigma's gone, gives us a epsilon iota. So go back to look at those contract matrices I gave you. So that's all that's happening. So it's the same thing, but we see some contractions that occur as a result of the liquid future ending on the future tense stem. Okay, so it's the future tense stem using a liquid tense stem ending. All right, so pointing out the same thing, menace, the noon is a liquid. And notice another thing, of course, is we see that rough breathing mark. Shows you there's been contraction, something changed. And so our future active indicative with liquid endings, meno, menace, mene, menomen, menumen, menete, menusin, I will remain, you will remain, he shall remain, we will remain, you will remain, versus poieo and meneo, same thing. Poieo is I do, meno, here's the poieo would be the future of I do, I will do. Poies would be you will do. Poie, you will remain, kind of thing. Poieman, poiuman, poiete, and poiusin. Future for I do versus I remain. Now, notice how I remain, meno versus meno. This is the present active indicative right here. Right? What's the difference? Well, there I have my action is the grave. Here I have the circumflex. And there's some change that occurs, some contractions that occur. There's my key. All right. So meno, same word, right? This one is I remain. This is I will remain. This is present tense. I am being remain. I don't think that works. I am remaining. Yeah, I am remaining, or I will remain, or I will remaining. I don't know. And so we see that those things. Menace. Menace. Oh, same word. No, it's not. This is the present tense. When we see the grave or the grave accent and versus menace, now that circumflex accent. So this is the future form, and that's what we're seeing over and over again. Okay, hope that makes some understandable. Same thing. Future liquid for middle, right? We're using our primary passive endings from the middle. Unless primary passive endings, middle passive endings, right? Metha, so my, psi, tai, metha, esta, untai. Same endings, nothing's changed. My, psi, tai, metha, esta, untai. But because we have this liquid and we have our transformative is going to be epsilon sigma once again we get these intervocalic, the epsilon and the omega with the sigma in the middle. So, get me out of here. And so we get the epsilon omega contraction or the epsilon contraction. And so we get, can't read it over there, menumai, mene, menetai, menu metha, menu esta, menu entai. And I will remain, you will remain, she, they will. All right. Hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you. Here's the same thing, right? Menumai. Well, menumai, there's a present tense stem. Obviously, my accent here is the grave. And here I see the circumflex. I see there's a contraction. I know I got a color coded to make it stand out, and it doesn't do that in the Bible. But just so you can see where the changes are. Mene, you see this contraction. This is future. Where this mene, also a eta subscript iota, but with the circumflex. Eta subscript iota, but with the grave accent on the over the epsilon. So mene, this would be you remain versus this is you will remain, and that's what we're seeing here. Poie is just another a different word showing the same liquid contraction. Poieo is its present active indicative form. When you make it in the future and you add the sigma, you get poiumai, poie, poietai, poiumeta, poiestai, poentai. All right, and now the fourth pattern, and we'll be closing out liquid futures. So when we have roots and a stop, iso and adzo verbs that end in a delta. So baptide is the root, right, for baptizo. Well, the root is baptide. We don't see the delta because we get these idzo and adzo verbs where the root ends in a delta. So we get baptizo and baptizo. And then the aso verbs will end in a velar. Tarak becomes taraso. Tarak becomes tarakso with the future form. So the present baptizo, the future baptizo. In the present taraso, and in the future tarakso. Okay, we have that sigma coming up with it, and that's going to see the changes associated with that. So we have these different patterns that change, and that all we're talking about is how vowels contract. Depending on what it comes to, that's all this is talking about. Is very vowels contracting in different forms in different patterns, and there's various clues to help you. You have the double consonant we already saw, ba with the balo, and so the root itself is modified. Balo, this is the future form, the present form. Again, we see the accent, the circumflex there. And we have some letters that are sometimes added, which is the iota with this sigma kappa. So the root is ario, I raise up, ario, and then it changes to aro. That iota is added, and we add the sigma to it, and we see some contractions, and we just go from R to Ro. So the root is R, and it will add the iota, and we get either a modified root that adds the iota. That's what it's doing. Ario, 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 Aro, and it drops there. It moves over here and then it drops off in its final form. So gnosko is gnosomai is a primary modification done in the root. Gno, present tense gno, future tense root gno, same root, right? In the present tense, it's gno plus the sigma kappa is gnosko. That's the present tense form, right? So you see a significant change here with it added the iota to it, right? Well, it helps us pronounce it, I guess. But here is the future form, gno, and it remained the same. And we add our future tense formative, the sigma. So it's gnosomai. It's hard to say. I'm so used to gnosko. I know. I will know here. Gnosomai kind of thing. So different ways. The root is, we have our root, and we have our tense stems, and the tense stems can change in different forms for that. But we can also see some different changes in the root when we move to different tense stems, or we have different roots for different stems, tense stems. Okay. So You also have an ablaut. Ablaut, remember, is a change in the vowel, not necessarily a lengthening. It could be a shortening. So apothon, and now we're talking about the root apothon, and here apothon nes isco, where we have the epsilon sigma cut isco isk added to it, but here we see that lengthening of the alpha to the eta, and we get apothesco, where that iota now subscript right here. Here we have to say for the future form, apothon, there's our apothon, but this time that alpha stays and we get apothon pneuma. Okay. Um, and so there was the lengthening did not occur. Anyway. And then we have compound verbs where you have a preposition plus the verb. Now here's the key: preposition is not going to change, right? It's going to be the root to the verb. The verbal part acts like a verb, a simple verb kind of thing. So ball, balo, there's a present tense, or there's a future tense. So ek ball, it's really, there's the compound ek from, the preposition from. Ball is the root for the present active, for to throw. Ek balo, there's a present tense. Ek balo, there's a future tense. No different, okay, than what we've seen so far. And I think that's the end of everything. So that is our review, guys. So hopefully some of that makes sense to you. If not, Andres and Damien will do a better job, I'm sure. Hopefully it makes sense to you and helps you kind of refresh and to think. And hopefully, I don't know if you went through it all, but maybe you just found the places where you're struggling. And well, I'm right on time. I just noticed the time thing here. It's been an hour and 16 and a half minutes right now. So not too bad. So I hope you kind of get something out of that. If you have any questions, just check with me. And I think you have your class with today's Wednesday, so you have it tomorrow morning. So you won't see this, I'm sure, between now and tomorrow morning. But when you do see it, then if you struggle with it, I'm going to say it's your fault because I gave you the video. I'm being sarcastic because I know I'm giving it to you very late. I certainly apologize about that. But, it is what it is. So I thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. If you have any questions, you need to reach out to me. I got to get caught up with grading and homework in different places. So I'll try to do some of that this week. We'll see you next week when we're going to chapter 21, which is, I forget now, is it imperfect? Let me remember. I don't remember if it's imperfect or not. Chapter 21 is the imperfect indicative. Yeah, so we move to a different tense stem. And it goes to the imperfect, which now moves us over to the secondary personal endings. And we see the imperfect and the aorist over the secondary personal endings because they're associated with past actions. And what we see as the imperfect will be a continuous kind of action, where the aorist will be more of a completed kind of action, both relative to from the speaker's perspective to the past. So anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.